offer some suggestions.
But it doesn't last forever, and that's the thing. I mean, you have this moment with your children at home for mealtime, and it's got to capitalize on that, right? Those are fleeting moments. Those are fleeting times that you don't get that back.
Welcome to the show called Let's Talk Homeschool, brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries. This is the show where we talk about everything homeschooling, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. We want to affirm and encourage you in the decision to homeschool, challenge and inspire you to take it to new heights, and celebrate everything you get to experience along the way in this adventure of a lifetime. We're your hosts, Davis and Rachael Carman, and today's show is titled The Family Dinner Project. Okay, Rachel, let's talk homeschool. It's close to Thanksgiving time, so families are probably going to be having some meals together, at least one big one, possibly on Thanksgiving Day. And in 2018 and 19, there was a research project titled The Family Dinner Project. And they have several findings from that project, one of which is that the average dinner in the United States lasts a very short time.
Wow,
Do
really?
you know how short?
I just know that ours lasted really long, so I don't know how short people could do dinner.
12 minutes.
Man,
That's
that
the
is short.
average length of a dinner time
Yeah.
at the house.
Okay.
So then get this, 1/3 of families, when they're having a meal at home, didn't talk at all.
Well, then that makes sense that it's so short, because
Right.
I think that's what made ours so long. It wasn't like I was serving 5-course meals. It was
Right.
like we were just talking.
Now here's an encouraging stat. A high number, 87%, have at least one family meal together each week.
Okay.
So that's good that there's at least one meal happening each week.
Yeah.
Now, we want to encourage you to have a lot more than one.
Right.
But I think one of the questions and potential struggles that families have is they're living a fast-paced life. Maybe they got too many activities going on. And so you end up taking the easy route of driving through the drive-through, eating on the road, on the go, and you end up not being home to have
Fair enough.
dinners.
Yeah.
But when you do,
Yep.
when you're home, because you're limiting some activities or it's a night without activities, and here you are at the house, what can you do with that to make the most of it? Because it's a Deuteronomy 6 moment.
It is.
You need to teach your kids. Scripture says to teach your kids when they rise up, when they lie down, when you walk along the way, and when you sit. And one of the great times during sit is an opportunity at the meal table, at dinner time, at breakfast, at lunch. And so we want to offer some suggestions for what you can do to make the most of mealtime, to make it a Deuteronomy 6 moment, to be intentional, and to be among the 87% that's having at least one meal together, if not more, to be among the 2/3 that's talking about something
Yeah.
at the table, and to make it last longer than 12 minutes.
Yeah.
These are your kids. This is your family. I think it should naturally last longer than 12, but
Right.
some people may struggle. So we want to offer some suggestions.
But it doesn't last forever, and that's the thing. I mean, you have this moment with your children at home for mealtime, and it's got to capitalize on that, right? Those are fleeting moments. Those are fleeting times that you don't get that back. So
Well, it's kind of like when you're in the car or van driving, which is another Deuteronomy 6 moment, you have a captive audience. They can't escape. So do something good with that.
Right.
Similarly, even though people could wander off and not be coordinated, you have a really high likelihood of having a captive audience where you can do something intentional, proactive, and worthwhile on purpose with a mission to make dinner and mealtime something that is not just part of your family culture and routine and rhythm, but something that's valuable that your kids look back on and say, oh, I miss our family mealtimes. Those were so great. I remember some of the conversations and even just the bonding that happens.
yeah, and I happen to think, and I know that this comes, I mean, totally admit that planning comes pretty easily for you and I know that it's not true for everybody, but I do think that planning for a family mealtime can be very helpful in terms of setting the table, setting the context That can be a very, very important component. However, right, I actually think it's both ends. I think there are times to really plan it well, light candles, get out your dishes, and plan a really, a meal they're not going to forget, right? Set the table. And I think that has a lot of value because you're training your children what it looks like to go to dinner. If you go to a restaurant, it's not like a foreign place to them. You're training them how to behave and all that, and that's great. But doing that in the context of your family says, you're valuable. This is important. I am invested in this. I mean, you're saying a lot of things that you're not verbalizing when you actually dare to plan and, like I said, light candles, get out your dishes, that whole thing. But the other end is valuable to you. It's also valuable on the spur of the moment, order out pizza, get out your paper plates, a roll of paper towels, sit in the front yard. It's both. I have a hard time advocating, though, for exclusively one or the other. I think really to be able to navigate both of those ends of it, have the flexibility for this, right, and the intentionality of this. I think both in a healthy family, both of those things happen.
Right. And some of what you're saying reminds me of that we had certain rhythms. We had a breakfast schedule in terms of what we ate on certain days.
We did.
And we didn't eat the same thing every day. It varied, but we knew what we had on Monday. We knew what we were eating on Tuesday. The kids knew it, and so there was an expectation. Similarly, with dinner times, we had a long-standing tradition of Friday night pizza night, and we would order out some. But I think some of our favorite memories were make your own pizza. Yeah. You got to customize it. People were looking at, what'd you do with your pizza? Yeah. Well, let me show you what I did with mine.
Yeah.
And then you make it to your liking, exactly customized to what you want, your perfect pizza, and then you eat it. Maybe you watch a movie, play a game. But it was a family event that lasted a while where there was a wide range of conversation. And that kind of leads to one of the suggestions we have, and that is having everybody involved from beginning to end. The prep, the eating. Nobody eats on their own when they're ready. You sit down at the same time. There's a prayer, which is kind of the green light to say, we're now beginning, we may now eat. Right. And there's a closure. People don't just wander away. There's an end to the conversation and the meal. And then there's a cleanup responsibilities that everybody's participating in and kind of staying in the same room together as you're working around each other with different responsibilities to finish up the entire dinner project.
Yeah, it's really what we're advocating for is that it's really part of your culture. And everybody has a role. We've talked about that before too in terms of building your children's self-esteem. It's not just telling them they're amazing, right? It's actually inviting them to be a part of a team, your family, and contributing and practicing responsibilities and learning and doing the right thing. That's what it means to build your child's self-esteem. It happens naturally when we do it that way instead of accommodating or excusing. And so that's what you do at Mealtimes. And you can do that 3 times a day if you're a homeschool family. Everybody can have a different responsibility. They can rotate responsibilities. But it is a whole family, all hands on deck process. It's not mom slaving around in the kitchen. It's not, dad just cleaning up the kitchen. It's everybody working together, and it can become a joyous time for everybody to pitch in.
Right. So here's some suggestions we want to have in terms of, we want to give you in terms of, okay, so what do we talk about? What kind of conversations are we going to run out if you have young ones, preteens, teenagers? So you can always read a book during that time. That's short. You want to keep that short, but in order to allow for conversation about what just happened in the story. Story time doesn't have to be just at bedtime, but there were times that we read short stories, just enough to the people who were interested and wanted to hear more, and primarily to have some discussion. There's plenty of devotional books or Bible reading story books that you can read a short excerpt from at the dinner table. And again, often with questions about, so what do you think about what happened in this story with this character in this Bible reference? We had Bible memory time was a big part of our experience.
That was generally at breakfast too. So that was like one of the things that we did at breakfast, or sort of set your mind on things above to set the tone for the day we would do versus at breakfast. I don't remember doing that as much in the evening. I mean, maybe we did, but I remember that was a big deal for us to do that at breakfast.
And what was really interesting about doing our Bible memory verses at the table is we had 7 kids, so we'd go around the table. Every kid would do their memory verse. Rachel and I would have some, and you don't get the memory verse the first time, so in order to help, okay, well now let's go around a second time to see if everybody got their verse a little better now that you said it once.
Yeah.
Second time, and you realize, okay, one more time, because we're all, it's starting to click with all of us. And we'd go around, and so you'd learn other people's verses just because you're hearing it 3 times.
Right.
And so you go around the table, and that takes a certain amount of time to do that. And especially at the beginning of new verses, everybody's struggling a little bit with the first time, and there's, you're having to look at it, and you're having to give some helps. But then by the end of the week, or however long it's taking, you're just kind of going around 3 or 4 times, and everybody's enjoying it more as it's coming into your head.
Yeah, and I think our kids in some ways had an unfair advantage at Awana night, right? Because as they were coming up, they remember their older siblings saying those verses, so they weren't even brand new to them, and sometimes they just latched onto them in advance. I mean, we had a couple of kids who did all the advanced stuff in Awana.
Yeah, the younger ones in particular for that reason.
Exactly, because I think they had the advantage. They heard it so many times. But man, I can't think of a thing that's more important than putting the Word of God in your kids' hearts. And so that coupled with the food, I mean, you're feeding the body, you're feeding the soul. It's a pretty glorious way to spend your dinner time.
So if you're not talking at the dinner table or the breakfast table or the lunch table, I hope it's not because you have cell phones or a TV going on in the background.
Yeah.
Those, I hope, would be givens to not have. No dining and texting, just like no driving and texting, no dining and texting.
Yeah.
And no TV in the background or anywhere close by, because we all know what that's going to distract everybody. They're going to be looking away. They're going to be listening. They're not going to be paying attention to what's happening at the table. And so much good can happen with no phones, no screens, no TVs, nothing else happening in the background.
But nothing beeping or vibrating either. I mean, it needs to not even be in your back pocket. I would advocate it's in a different room. I mean, it's not. For one thing, I need to find the study, but I actually read a study that said the mere presence of a phone, not just on the table, but in your back pocket or your purse, still changes the conversation. And until we're willing to latch onto that and do something about it, our conversations aren't going to be what they could be. And I think one of the reasons is when there's a phone present, whether you're at the dinner table with your spouse on a date or with your family or an associate, basically what you're saying is this device can interrupt this at any time. I mean, I'm here with you, but if this does something, I'm not here with you anymore. Right. I really think our kids need to know that dinner time is a time they have us totally and completely. And so it won't blow up if you don't answer it. And if somebody needs you, you can talk to them soon enough. But I think leaving your phones in another room and not having them able to interrupt you is a powerful thing.
Well, it is. And I'll interrupt this broadcast to say Thanksgiving is right around the corner. So even around the Thanksgiving table, if you're with a large group of family, put the phones away.
No phones.
Just have the conversations. And the temptation often in large group settings is maybe you're having a lively conversation and somebody says, oh, who was it that did that historical event? And what do people do? They want to pull out their phone and look it up and say, oh, it was so-and-so on this date.
Don't do it.
No, you don't have to know who did it and what dates. Just continue where you are in the conversation. You got enough people around the table. Don't start even showing the pictures. And like Rachel said, the screen alone creates a new dynamic that takes away from the verbal conversation and the camaraderie and the bonding and the relationship building that happens when you're just sitting around a table, enjoying a meal, sharing a memory, and having conversation.
And I'll take it even a step further. I think it cheapens the conversation when it's mitigated or resourced or supplemented by information on a screen. It's not the same conversation, and so put it somewhere else. I know we had a daughter who started a dinner group at her university at one point. And you had to sign up to come and everything, but the policy was no phones at dinner. And so when you came to the dinner party, she had a basket and she collected everybody's phone, and then they were put in a different room for the 2 to 3 hours that they shared dinner together. There were actually students who signed up to come, and they knew that policy, but they would come, and when she actually offered the basket for them to put their phone in, literally would not stay for dinner because they could not imagine not being accessible for a dinner party. It starts with us. Right. So mom and dad, it starts with us. If you're hosting Thanksgiving, have a basket, collect the phones, put them in a different room, and enjoy the freedom of screen device-free conversation for 2 or 3 hours.
Well, right. And an interesting observation that our kids made when they left our nest, when they went away to school, when they started their own careers, is just that. They would be talking about something that happened when they were growing up, and we were talking about this at the dinner table, and their friends would interrupt them and say, time out. You're talking about this as though this happened all the time, that you're having a conversation around the dinner table. And our kids would pause and say, well, because we did. And they're like, it was a foreign concept to these 20 and 25-year-olds to have meals together, let alone conversations at a meal with family. And so, again, this is an opportunity for you to practice Deuteronomy 6 with your kids, teach them to love God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength by having meals together that are meaningful, with conversation, with prep, with everybody in sync together, with cleanup responsibilities afterwards, with this being part of what your family does. There are consequences that are, and blessings that come from this that you can't really know about in advance. And we're here to tell you that there's a lot of rewards that come that we didn't even know we were sowing into, that now we're reaping some of the benefits of, that our kids benefited and were blessed as a result.
Well, and I think, and I don't want to chase this squirrel, except to say, I think what we need now, right, in our culture is what we can begin in our families, and that is communication. We need to be having these conversations. I think we're in a place in our culture where we've got warring ideas, and one side that happens to scream louder and is perhaps better funded, their method of getting what they want has been to shut down conversation. Our dining room tables need to be places where we foster conversation, and not just conversation we're comfortable with necessarily. When you started this discussion a minute ago and you were saying, what do you talk about at the dinner table? I thought, what have we not talked about at our dinner table? I think for us to dare to interject and pursue and cultivate and nurture conversation around meal times means that we're positioned to change the world. We are equipping our children to have these conversations, to engage in these conversations, to not be fearful of these conversations. And I think you can't share the gospel without a conversation, and you can't change the world without talking about it. And so I really think we're talking about an opportunity as we step into the holidays and just the mundane of every day: cereal, eggs, oatmeal, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, takeout pizza. Have the conversation.
Right. Well, and in the last couple of Thanksgivings, I specifically sent an email to the family ahead of time with some questions that we might ask at the Thanksgiving meal. And one year, the series of questions went along these lines. And this is from the Colson Christian Worldview Center.
And this is a great set of questions. Feel free to lift this. This is awesome.
And our kids are still thinking about these questions because they had never heard these questions before, and it really prompted some really good discussion and post-meal conversation. And that is, what's good in our culture that we can promote? And then just let people might have to pause and think about that to answer, but they realize that's a good question. I'd like to think of an answer to that. And we go around and different answers prompt other answers. Then a related question: what's missing in culture that we can add?
I love that question, because that really draws on their creativity. What is their gifting, and how can they creatively give this to the world,
right.
or start this?
Yeah. So the first is what's already here that we should promote.
Right.
This next is what's missing that needs to be here that we can add. And then what is negative that we should resist?
Right.
What bad things are happening that we need to say no? We need to stop. We need to fight against and we need to resist.
And that one's powerful too, because so often we get caught up in the culture. We get caught up in the stream and the current that we're in, and we don't even pause to reflect on that. And that conversation can be really powerful, because you can say, yeah, I realize I've gotten caught up in something that I shouldn't have been caught up in. I need to stop. Yeah.
So those are just some examples of a well-placed question.
Isn't there a fourth question?
Yes, but I don't remember what it is. That's why I didn't do
okay,
it
but
now.
is it what is evil that you need to stop?
Oh yeah. So one is what's bad that we need to resist, and then the other is what's evil that we need to stop.
Okay. So I think all four of those, being able to lay out all four of those in front of your family and really have those conversations and push back on those, because I think each one of those, I think that can really be a bonding discussion, and it's never a done discussion.
Right.
It's a conversation that continues on. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So think of some questions that you might ask that are, they don't have to be too deep, but maybe they are. But they don't even have to be controversial, but a little thought-provoking, well-placed. What is God doing in your life? What's God teaching you? What's God calling you towards these days? Questions along those lines, and who knows where the conversation will go.
Yeah, it's going to go a great place. And again, the beauty of having these kind of conversations is your kids aren't going to be around your table forever. At some point, they're going to move on to the next step and what God has called them to. And having started these conversations now, you'll continue them with your kids even when they're gone.
That's right. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been a Let's Talk Homeschool brought to you by Apologia Educational Ministries, and we're your hosts, Davis and Rachael Carman. As always, we're walking by faith and enjoying the homeschooling adventure of a lifetime.